Dr. Seuss gets canceled. House Democrats have now just passed a bill that will entirely change the process of our elections. And Joe Biden calls Republican governors Neanderthals. I'll be getting into that and more on The William Hall Show. All right, welcome to the show. I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Seuss. If you haven't, you've been living under a rock for your entire life. So these books are children's books. They've been around for many, many, many years. They're kind of just a staple for books that people and kids learn, and people are familiar with them. They've been around forever. They have many different spots at theme parks, you name it. Dr. Seuss has been around for a very, very, very long time. And now 6 of those books have been deemed as inappropriate by the new cancel culture. The same cancel culture that has banned certain types of products from the shelves, from Aunt Jemima to Uncle Ben's rice to many other things. They've canceled a lot of things that have been in our culture for many years because they deem it as being just insensitive or racist, however they want to put it. It's always another terminology that they use for this. But now 6 of these books are no longer going to be published anymore. They're gone at this point. And this is actually coming directly from the Dr. Seuss Foundation. They don't want this published anymore either, now that everybody has been outraged at this. Or not everybody, but of course we're talking about the woke Twitter mob. So they're saying that it actually portrayed people in ways that are hurtful and wrong. Okay, so what kind of hurtful and wrong ways did these books really portray people? So one of the books portrayed an Asian character eating food with, hold it, chopsticks. Seriously. And another book depicted barefooted African men wearing grass skirts. Okay, I mean, we know that people in Africa don't wear like grass skirts, so what is the problem here? I mean, seriously, what is the issue? Because of, I don't understand it. I'm really confused, because what is it that people are getting so upset about? I mean, these aren't stereotypes. Clearly they're not. It just looks like stuff in a kid's book. So last week, Loudoun County Public Schools, one of Virginia's largest school districts, actually canceled Dr. Seuss due to racial overtones. So they're just straight up taking this out of schools because of stuff like this that doesn't really sound offensive at all. I mean, it hasn't been for the longest period of time. Why now, of course? I think it's just because people are just being way too sensitive to everything. But Dr. Seuss Landing continues to be, it's actually this area at Universal, the whole theme park and everything. So they actually had to come out and make a statement about this, basically saying that it continues to be very popular with our guests, and we value our relationship with Seuss Enterprises. We removed the books from our shelves as they have asked, and we will be evaluating our park experience in the future. But our guests can plan on continuing to be able to enjoy their favorite experiences at Seuss Landing. So even the theme parks now are kind of or censoring the books, taking them off of the shelves. They're not sure exactly what's going to go on with that. And the issue is that as conservatives, we don't want children involved in politics. I mean, I wasn't involved when I was a kid with politics or anything like that, but you now have the left that is really trying to involve children into politics, really. Because they're taking all of these things like Dr. Seuss, and they're taking all of these things that really are not offensive at all, and then basically saying, well, this is actually teaching kids about racism somehow. Like, what? There's always this thing that the left is trying to chase, and it's their agenda. They are pushing that on our children at every chance and step of the way that they get to. They change history and tell you, and are now teaching kids that history is entirely racist no matter what. They look and view everything through this lens of racism, and then all of a sudden they're upset about a Dr. Seuss book? I don't think that makes any sense at all. And you have to take into consideration, or at least for myself, I was asking the question, has anyone asked the kids about this? I mean, is there any provable way to show that kids somehow viewed this as racist? Or that the kids' minds were warped in some way that was wrong? These books have been and continue to be entirely harmless. Yet now all of a sudden it's the worst thing ever. You don't want to get into a point where we're banning stupid stuff like this, because I mean, seriously, what else is next? I mean, some of the stuff I'm like, okay, you know what? I think most of us can choose to not really be all that offended about. But what is really offensive in these? What really is it? Obviously, it's not that offensive at all, at least in my opinion, and I don't think it is for most people that are just normal people living in the world today, because we know better. Kids know better. Leftists will always find something to be outraged about, no matter what it is, every single step of the way. You had Amazon that was banning books about transgenderism. They've banned other books that basically anything that disagrees or brings any rational conversation into the spectrum when it deals with anything that's against what the far left believes. Amazon's willing to ban that. So is Amazon going to ban this now, where you literally can't buy Dr. Seuss? I mean, at first they'll tell you, well, it's the children that we're worried about. Clearly, it's just the kids, which, of course, once again, the kids have no idea. They don't care. They're just loving the stories. They're just reading the books. Think about it this way. You know, when you're reading the Bible, when you're younger, you look at all of these and learn about all of these different Bible stories and Noah and the Ark and all these different stories and things like that. But it's only until you're an adult that you kind of grow up and you're like, wow, these stories are a lot more in depth, right? You start to actually, once you read the Bible and read the words in the text and understand the context about what's going on, you kind of develop this more mature understanding of what it is. It's not just this simple childhood story about the Bible. You now really understand the purpose, really what God was doing, that knowing the ark wasn't this like cool thing about all the cute little animals getting on the ark. It was about God punishing the sins of the people that, didn't go along with what God had planned for them. And Noah being the only righteous, or his family and them being the only righteous people that were there. There's a big difference in how you read something as a child versus when you're much older. So to see them do this with these types of books like this is just ridiculous. Kids don't get it. They're not going to understand all of the intricacies that go into books like this. And even if they did, there isn't anything there that's racist at all. And what's crazy about this is that you actually had Michelle Obama. And here's a picture here, if you're watching this on video, where you can see her reading Dr. Seuss to these students. It's kind of weird, isn't it? It was fine then, but now it's not okay. Now we have to be offended by it, but of course, when Michelle Obama was doing it, it's perfectly fine. To me, this really highlights the difference between conservatism and progressivism. Because conservatives we're looking at conserving things. We're just normal people that are just trying to say, there's some things that are just inherent values. There are some things that we just want to leave as is. They're good things. There's things that we can learn from history, from the real history, right? But you have progressives that are so bent on trying to change everything. Their only goal is to move forward. So the problem is that 3 years ago, something was okay. And then now, all of a sudden, it's the worst thing ever. We have to get rid of it out of the stores. You can't have it at university. You can't buy it on Amazon. You can't read about it in school. You can't learn about it in college. That's the way that progressives are trying to push things, because to them, we can't deal with this. We can't talk about these. We can't even have a conversation. There is no room for conversation. If we deem it as being racist or insensitive, it must go. It must disappear. That is how the left-wing ideology is so messed up. Because instead of actually trying to have a conversation with people, to actually maybe let people make that determination for themselves, they're telling you can't read it. I'm not going to allow you to see it because I deem it as being inappropriate. That's where we're at right now. And all it's going to, and if you think something's safe today, wait 3 years, wait 5 years, wait 10 years, because ultimately progressives are going to catch up to that too, and then that's going to be canceled. As I mentioned on my show, it's a warning that I believe is very true. The Bible will not be available on Amazon for very long. Give it a few years, and the Bible's going to be gone. It's going to be out of bookstores. It's going to be off of Amazon. It's going to be real hard to get your hands on the Bible because they're going to deem that as hate speech. I mean, they already do. They already hate and despise Christians for everything. Lord forbid we have a moral ground to stand on. They don't want that to happen. So if there's a book that's out there that's perpetuating it, they're going to make sure they do everything in their power to make sure that is not even able to be purchased by anybody, somebody that's maybe a new Christian and they're trying to find the Bible or they just want to read it. Nope, can't find it. Can't get it anywhere. That's what they're going to be doing. It starts with things that are just as minuscule as Dr. Seuss, and pretty soon it's the word of God. So that's the direction that we're heading in at this point. So another story that's kind of going on that's related to that, related to these books, is that there's this Toronto Public Library that is eliminating late fees to combat racial inequity. Okay, so let that sink in for a second here. So basically, this public library is trying to waive late fees for 33,000 children accounts that have overdue books. Waiving these fees will cost the library about $600,000 in revenue. So, because kind of like Blockbuster, everybody would say they made all their money on the late fees or late movies and things like that. So, in a separate statement, though, they claim that the late fines have a disproportionate effect on racialized and low-income communities in Toronto. The same statement estimated that 5% of children from low-income communities have blocked library cards because of overdue fines, compared to the 1% of children from wealthier families. Here's where they went wrong. If they want to get rid of late fees, fine, do that. Get rid of the late fees. That's your business. You choose how you want to run it. The issue that we have here is that they're attributing this to race. They're saying, well, if you're not white, then there's a higher chance that you're never going to return our book. That you're just basically going to steal it and run away with it and not pay late fees at all. You're just treating the library as a public service for everybody to just run right in, steal books, take them for free, and then walk out and never come back again. That's what they're telling people. That if you're black, you have more of a tendency for that to happen. Once again, in the name of trying to be woke, oftentimes these things turn into just being racist. You're literally just telling people, hey, you're going to return these books late. You're not going to pay the fees if you return at all. So you must be black and poor. That's basically what they're saying here. Like if they want to go in and say, okay, well, we're going to change things because of the way that the late fees are, and they want to get rid of those late fees, fine. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's if you want to create some other type of program that maybe allows for these low-income families or minorities or whatever it is to sign up for it, okay, whatever, and maybe they can help them out specifically on a family-by-family basis, but to change all the rules and then just say, well, we're only changing them because the people that were supposed to be returning them they can't keep up anyways. They're not going to return our books. I mean, this won't help. I mean, you're basically turning the library into a free book service where people just take it and go and never return them. Because now people have no incentive to return the books at all. They're just not going to come back. And now you're going to have not only poor families taking advantage of that, but probably everyone taking advantage of that. They're going to take books and they're never coming back with them because why would you? Out of the goodness of your own heart? Most people are doing that because life has these fees, like in this situation, or consequences for returning things late and not doing things in a timely manner. That's how life works. So we'll see kind of what goes with that. But once again, this is kind of stupid. It's just really, and it just sounds racist when they're trying their hardest not to be. So in another portion of what's going on here, House Democrats have now passed a bill that is making it significantly easier for the elections to be messed up. Let's just say it that way. Okay, let's just put it in the best way possible. House Democrats are basically changing everything about the way that we do elections right now. So if you thought this last election was bad, just imagine all of those rules that changed in Pennsylvania, for example, in the lead up to the election, to be done on a federal level. That's basically what they're doing with this new bill. So this new bill federalizes the election process. What does that mean? That basically means that instead of allowing states to have different rules depending on the states that they're in, and that those rules could be slightly different depending on certain conditions, what those states are set up for. There are still some states that do paper balloting only. There's still some states that do a lot of just only electric balloting. It just depends on where you're at. Those rules out the window. Federalize everything. It'll be the same across the board. And that could sound good, but here's the problem. It's all the stuff that they're pushing with it. So what they're doing, first of all, is that they're getting rid of the voter ID. So the idea of being able to walk in and needing a driver's license or some type of identification, gone. Completely gone. The other thing that they're doing is mandating no-fault absentee ballots. So any of these ballots that are out there that, usually with an absentee, you would be able to request a ballot ahead of time. But they're getting rid of that entirely. So basically any ballot that comes in, you can just go ahead and just submit it. No big deal at all. They're banning witness signature or notarization requirements for absentee ballots as well. So in other words, those absentee ballots, normally you'd need somebody to see that you really signed it so that you're not getting a bunch of fake ballots in the mail. Well, nope, that's not going to happen either. They're going to allow for all of these ballots to just flood in at ridiculously insane numbers with a bunch of signatures on it, and nobody knows who they came from. Probably the same signatures. Who knows? So the newly passed bill will require states to offer mail-in ballots, which is already ridiculous because remember, they used coronavirus to validate the mail-in ballots in this last election. Okay, that was their validation, coronavirus. Now, this thing is basically saying this should be the case regardless of what's going on. A minimum of 15 days early voting, while also demanding same-day or online voter registration. Now, the Democrats are going to say, this is just to make it easier so people can vote. Yes, look. The problem is that with all of these situations, regardless of what situation we're looking at here, but when it comes down to the election, you're talking about making it super easy for anybody to just vote on a whim, regardless of whether they're a citizen, not a citizen, regardless of whether they're registered, not registered. You basically Democrats just want people to walk in, if they walk in at all on election day, and just vote without having to show anything at all. I mean, there's really nothing stopping from the same person from walking in the voting booth over and over and over again, hoping for the best. So the bill would also include automatic voter registration. So basically, you're just going to have a bunch of people just automatically getting registered to vote, regardless of whether they ask to be registered or not. And they're going to pull all of these resources, by the way, from other probably random government things that you've done, whether you filed taxes or whatever it is. They're just going to throw you into the registration automatically. It would allow convicted felons to vote after they get out of prison. And we designate Election Day a national holiday for federal employees, just to make sure that people that want to vote on the actual day itself can register right there the second they walk into the office for the first time. Okay? So this is a broad sweeping bill, taking complete control away from the states entirely. So one of the first points I'm going to bring up here is the fact that, or the biggest problem here, is that it will legalize voting for convicted felons all over the country, even if you were convicted of election fraud itself. So if you're somebody who went around and you were doing the whole ballot harvesting and everything like that, you actually got arrested, you'd completely be able to actually vote based off of this bill if it goes into effect. So it doesn't matter what your crime is. There literally is no crime that's exempt from this. You can do it again. Doesn't really matter. This would also weaken the security of our elections and make it harder to protect voters against fraud. Now, here's how. It would automatically register voters from the DMV, like I said, from the IRS, doesn't matter, any government database, you're going to automatically be registered to vote. Here's the thing. Voting is a right, not a requirement. And they're treating this like it's some kind of thing that everybody needs to participate in. I've always said this in the back of my mind when it comes down to voting and the process of how many people vote and when it is and whatever that situation comes up is. So the thing that I usually think about is, imagine for a second that voting was a Facebook poll, right? That people just got to pop up on their phone, that AT&T and Verizon, they all got together and basically said, hey, look, we're going to give you everybody that has a phone or is on Facebook or whatever it is, a pop-up, and they're just going to choose their candidate right there. Just click on it. That's basically what's happening right now. The problem is that what you're going to wind up getting is a lot of people that are just completely ignorant. They have no idea what's going on with our country. They have no idea what these people that they're voting for stand for. So they're ignorant voters. And the problem is that how do you get more ignorant voters? You make it super easy to vote. You make it so that they can walk in. They're already registered. They don't need to sign anything. They just walk in and basically just cast a vote. Democrats know that their base, the people that are mostly going to vote for them, are ignorant voters at this point. They're people that do nothing but watch mainstream media. They're people that claim that they're not involved in politics. They're people that hate Donald Trump but couldn't give you one good reason as to why. Those are the people that are going to wind up voting for Democrats. They know this, and they're only trying to take advantage of it because those people tend to be poor. They tend to be people that are not paying attention, like I said, to anything that's going on in politics right now. So those people are going to have a much higher chance of voting for Democrats. They realize it. We know it. And that's what they're trying to do, is to make this as easy as possible. And if you object to any of these things, by the way, if you have any problem with any of the things that I listed off that are going to be in this bill, you are against voter. And if you are against anything in this bill, you are trying to suppress the vote, not uphold standards. You are just trying to make sure that people can't vote. You're racist because you're against minorities. You must hate black people. That's what they're going to tell you. What do we want? What are the things that the conservatives are just asking for? Simple enough as it is. We want a voter ID. The same thing that you're required to show when you go and you buy alcohol, for example. What about a valid address? They're not requiring that either. And a real signature? Lord forbid somebody actually has a verified signature on their ballot. But if you want those things right there, those three simple things, you're racist. You're trying to suppress the vote. You're trying to keep people from voting. No, what we're trying to do is make sure that we have a secure election. We want to make sure we know who won instead of wondering after the fact and looking at the evidence, which is clearly showing that it's all over the place. That's all that we're asking for. And Democrats will do everything in their possible power to make sure that we don't get the ability for any of these basic things that are required in so many parts of your everyday life, by the way. They want to make sure that none of those things are going to stand in the way from ignorant people just being able to walk in there that just came from Mexico to be able to go in there and cast a vote for whatever candidate is going to allow them to stay in the country longer. That's basically, that's all that's happening there. So this is going to the Senate next. So we'll see what happens with that. If it winds up coming to a 50-50 vote between Democrats and Republicans, keep in mind, Kamala Harris would be the tiebreaker. So that does not end well in that situation. So before I move on, just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can donate directly to the show. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, wherever that is at, make sure that you leave a rating as it does help the show out as well. Joe Biden called the governors of Texas, Mississippi, pretty much any state that's actually choosing not to force its citizens to wear a mask. He called them Neanderthals.
I think it's a big mistake. Look, thank you. I hope everybody's realized by now, these masks make a difference. We are on the cusp of being able to fundamentally change the nature of this disease because of the way in which we're able to get vaccines in people's arms. We've been able to move that all the way up to the end of May to have enough for every American, to get every adult American to get a shot. And the last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime, everything's fine, take off your mask, forget it. It still matters.
What happened to unity, Joe? I mean, isn't this the great uniter? The guy that's supposed to bridge the gap between left and right, and we can't look at ourselves as red versus blue? Yeah, that didn't really happen, did it? I'll be honest with you, if Neanderthal thinking means being a constitutionalist, then I guess we're all Neanderthals. I don't care, because I don't take offense to this coming from a guy that can barely complete a sentence half the time. I'm surprised he even got the words out as it is in that clip, but keep in mind also that he's specifically talking about masks. The same mask that he very rarely is wearing correctly. The whole video he's touching it, grabbing it. Once again, they don't do this correctly anyways. Oftentimes, they're the ones that are hypocrites. The people that are the worst about trying to require people to wear one are typically the ones breaking their own rules all the time. So Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, actually responded to Biden about this in this clip here.
Is one of the people that he was thinking about. Governor, how do you respond to the president's unification message of calling you and other governors a Neanderthal?
Two things, Brian. First, it obviously is not the type of thing that a president should be saying. But second, he kind of said it on the worst day he could have, because the same day he said that, in Texas, the Biden administration was releasing illegal immigrants into our communities who had COVID. The Biden administration was spreading COVID in South Texas yesterday because of their lack of constraint of testing and quarantining people who'd come across the border illegally. The Biden administration was exposing Texans to COVID. That is Neanderthal-type approach to dealing with the COVID situation. But more importantly, Brian, is this. and that is with regard to masks. The change in Texas really wasn't all that much different from where we were before for a couple of reasons. First, we are still strongly advocating that every Texan follow the best practice. Where we are today is completely different from where we were this time last year when Texans and Americans didn't know how to deal with this. For an entire year, Texans have learned the best practice, and that is to wear a mask, and we still strongly recommend that people do wear a mask. But Brian, know this, that I know you folks know, and that is when we saw the spikes in cases after Christmas and New Year's, we saw that most of those spikes, they didn't occur in businesses or in schools or in other locations like that, like retail centers. Most of those transmissions occurred in the home setting, where people were not wearing a mask in the first place. And so the mask requirement being eliminated isn't going to make that big of a change in the state of Texas. Also, people in Texas will continue to wear masks, even though there's not a state mandate. We're just in a situation now where government mandates are not needed because Texans do know the best practices.
Hey, Governor, you're not telling everyone to do it. You give them the freedom to decide. Like, for example, CVS, JCPenney, Hyatt Hotels, Kroger, Macy's, Starbucks. I go on to Target. You got to wear a mask to go in there. That's the same thing they're doing in Florida. It's up to.
And of course, what he's saying is absolutely correct. I actually did this in a separate video where I talk specifically about them allowing these immigrants to come over, knowing, by the way, that they had COVID-19. They tested them, they were positive, and they said, hey, release them on into the United States. Come on in. You cannot pretend to care about the coronavirus when you are continuing to let these illegal immigrants come into the country that have actually legitimately tested positive. You clearly don't care about the American citizens. There's no way that you possibly could do that when you're continuing to be a hypocrite with this other immigration policy. It just goes to show, once again, you can't be woke as a Democrat consistently across the board. It just doesn't work because you'll pretend. And this is why I guess really all the masks, the whole virus has been politicized so much. This is where it really comes to backfire them. Because see, the thing is that conservatives are saying, look, don't worry about the masks. This isn't that big of a deal. You know, everybody's going to get the virus at some point anyways. It's just a matter of time. But the Democrats are the ones telling you need to wear it. But yeah, we're going to open up the border. Come on in, immigrants that have actually tested positive for it. Come on right on in. We don't really care. It just shows the hypocrisy in all of this. So the another story about Biden as well said he actually got cut off at a press conference where he had finished speaking, if you want to call what he's doing speaking, but he finished speaking and he does this kind of opening to a Q&A and asking, hey, does anybody have any questions for me? And this is what happened.
Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions if that's what I'm supposed to do, Nance, whatever you want me to do.
So if you're seeing that on video, you'll see that the entire feed just gets cut right off. Gone. I mean, what happened to the questions? It literally just stops. Everything's gone and he's off. You know, the fact is that the White House is the one that cut the feed. And I think we know exactly why they cut the feed. It's because when Biden is not on script, he is completely lost. I mean, badly lost. He has no idea what he's saying half the time, especially when he's responding to questions. Because usually they try to throw him very softball questions in the first place. If he gets asked anything that's even remotely complicated, he loses it. He just completely loses track of what he's talking about, and it just goes very badly for him. And the fact is that the White House was probably like, you know what? We don't want any clips of this guy in the news this week where he's mumbling and bumbling all over himself. So we're just going to cut that feed off, cut it clean, no questions asked at the end of this. This is no different than how he was behaving during his campaign as well. If you recall, there were multiple times where he basically just had no questions at the end. Done. Because that town hall that he did was just horrible. I mean, there was so many gas in that. It was just ridiculous. When he's asked questions, and even if they probably give him the questions ahead of time, it's a bad idea for Biden, plain and simple. So to end everything with a bit of good news, the Alabama Senate actually makes hormone therapy and surgery for trans kids a felony. Okay, this is a very, very, very big deal. Senators voted 23-4 to approve the measure, and it was dubbed the Vulnerable Child Compassion and Protection Act. And it basically made statements that children aren't mature enough to make these decisions on surgeries and drugs, which of course is common sense. They're absolutely correct with this. the fact that a lot of people, specifically Democrats, actually voted against this right here should be very concerning to you. They want a lot of these kids to be able to fully transition themselves. Hormone blockers, you name it. They want all of this stuff to happen to these children that are just claiming they're a certain way. Most of the time, it's the parents that are driving this, by the way. It's the parents that are kind of pushing their kids in that direction. Because most of the time, if you just raise your children like a normal person, you're not going to have any of these issues. They're not going to say anything different. They might see something at school and think it's kind of cool, but that's about it. But when you have these parents pushing these children to do these things, and it's almost like they want it to happen because they want for there to be some kind of thing that they can brag to their friends about, like, oh, my child has to get all of these surgeries and hormone this and hormone that. That's the way that a lot of these parents behave. And it's ridiculous that they're even allowing them to do this to their children when they're too young to make any other decisions in their lives right now. Crazy as it is, you have to be 25 to rent a car, but as a child, you can literally change your entire sex. That stuff like that makes no sense. You have to be 21 to buy alcohol, tobacco, you name it, but you can change your entire gender with all of these drugs that will, by the way, scar you for life. It's not like these things kind of taper off after you get off of them or something. It's not like once you turn 21 and you change your mind, it's all hunky-dory. There's plenty of videos on YouTube and other places talking and showing the different people that have gone through these procedures that are now 20 years old or 30 years old. And they're like, wow, like my entire life is ruined because of decisions my parents pushed me to make years ago that I wish they never would have done that at all. So in a related story to that, the Mississippi House and Senate also recently voted in a pretty much blowout fashion to protect female sports by banning biological males from being able to compete against women, which we talked about under the Equality Act in the last show as well. But that is a big step forward. Obviously, people are extremely concerned about these types of things because Joe Biden is president. Joe Biden's going to let all of these issues continue to fester, and he's going to let it happen because that is the plan of the Biden administration. So it's great to see that we're at least seeing some states step up, make some actual hard decisions that are easy decisions, but hard to get past a lot of times, to get these things put into motion in these states and say, no, not here. You're not having that happen here. We're protecting our women. We're protecting our children. We need to be doing this all over the United States. Every state and all the governors and all the people that support these things need to actually put all of this stuff where it actually matters. Make legislation, put it in bills, get it passed, because this stuff is going to only get worse under a Biden presidency, as we're already seeing now. People, whether that's flooding into the country or whether you're going to see a massive spike of kids that are all of a sudden wanting to get all of these surgeries all of a sudden. They'll say it's the kid's choice, but it's really just the parents that are doing that. We saw the video of the mother talking about the gay he sees to her child. Well, I mean, what are the chances that that child is going to be deemed as gay? I would actually bet you money that mother would be extremely upset if her child came out straight, because everything that she's doing is leading them on this path to be gay, to be one of these woke things. That's what they want for their children. So we need to protect these kids against this kind of child abuse, this mental child abuse, and in the case of the transitioning stuff, really a physical child abuse. So regardless of that, that's all I have for you today. I thank you for watching or listening to the show, and I'll see you on the next one. You just watched an episode from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.